The line at the bustling downtown bank was unusually long, a mix of hurried customers and quiet grumblers. The low hum of chatter filled the air as Eric Walker, a sharp-dressed young black man in his late 20s, stepped forward to the counter. His confidence exuded sophistication, but the sneering glance of the new teller, Lisa Bradshaw, cut through the air like a blade. Her narrowed eyes moved from Eric's meticulously tailored suit to the neatly folded deposit slip in his hand. "Are you sure you're in the right place?" Lisa's voice dripped with disdain as she leaned closer, her blonde ponytail swishing. The room seemed to hush momentarily as several heads turned toward the interaction. Eric froze, confusion flickering across his face. "Excuse me," Lisa smirked, leaning back against her chair. "This line's for deposits. You sure you've got something to put in the bank?" Her words were laced with condescension, her tone a weapon designed to humiliate. Eric's calm demeanor barely wavered. "Yes, I'm sure," he replied, sliding the deposit slip across the counter. Lisa picked up the slip, her manicured nails tapping against the desk. Her eyes widened slightly as she saw the figure, $1.2 million. Her smirk faltered but quickly returned, this time more venomous. "A prank?" Lisa sneered. This can't be real." Eric's jaw tightened, but he kept his composure. "It is. I suggest you process it." Instead of complying, Lisa held the slip up, her voice suddenly louder. "Can someone get security? We've got a joker here." The bank's patrons gasped. Some whispered in hushed tones, their eyes darting between Lisa and Eric. Eric's heartbeat thundered in his chest, but his face remained unreadable. He felt the heat of humiliation rise as he glanced around the room. This was not a scene he'd intended to cause. A tall security guard approached, his hand resting casually on the baton at his side. "What's the issue here?" he asked, his tone firm but neutral. Lisa thrust the deposit slip at him. "This guy's playing some kind of joke. Look at this amount. There's no way it's real." The guard looked at Eric, his expression unreadable. Eric reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek black card. The crowd gasped again. It was no ordinary card. It bore the logo of the very bank they were standing in, a symbol of prestige. "I'm not a joker," Eric said evenly. "I'm an investor and trader for this bank. And if you check your system, you'll find my name right there." Lisa's face turned ghostly pale. The guard's eyes flicked from the card to Eric, then back to Lisa. For the first time, doubt seeped into the teller's smug expression. The room felt electric with tension. Before the situation could escalate further, a commanding voice boomed from behind the counter. "What's going on here?" The bank manager, a stern woman in her 40s with an air of authority, stepped forward. Her sharp gaze took in the scene in an instant. She looked at Eric, then at Lisa, before addressing the security guard. "Escort Mr. Walker to my office," she ordered. "And Lisa, stay here. We need to talk." Eric's lips pressed into a thin line as he followed the guard. But before he left, he turned to Lisa, his voice low and deliberate. "Next time, maybe don't judge a book by its cover." As Eric disappeared into the back office, the room buzzed with whispers. Lisa stood frozen, her confidence shattered, her face flushed with embarrassment. What would you have done in Eric's shoes? Have you ever witnessed anything like this before? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The manager's office was stark yet sophisticated, with polished oak furniture and framed accolades lining the walls. Eric sat across from Mrs. Reynolds, the bank's manager, who was now scrolling through her tablet with a furrowed brow. The tension hung heavy in the room, broken only by the faint hum of the air conditioning. Mrs. Reynolds looked up, her expression neutral. "Mr. Walker, I'd like to personally apologize for what happened out there. It's unacceptable, and I assure you it will be addressed." Eric nodded, his face calm but his voice edged with frustration. "This isn't just about me. It's about how people are treated, judged before they're even given a chance." The manager placed her tablet down and folded her hands. "You're absolutely right. Lisa's behavior doesn't align with our values. I'll be taking immediate action to ensure this doesn't happen again." Eric leaned back slightly, his posture relaxed but his eyes piercing. "Good. Because I'm not just a client. I'm a partner. My work directly impacts this bank's profits, and incidents like this damage more than just personal relationships." Mrs. Reynolds' eyes widened momentarily, but she quickly recovered. Understood. And again, my deepest apologies. Is there anything else we can do to make this right? Eric's lips curved into a faint smile, but there was no humor in it. I'll let you know after Lisa's handled. Before Mrs. Reynolds could respond, a knock on the door interrupted them. The guard opened it slightly, motioning for the manager. She excused herself and stepped out, leaving Eric alone. He took a deep breath, allowing himself a moment to reflect. He wasn't new to being underestimated, but the public humiliation stung more than he cared to admit. As he waited, Eric's mind drifted to the path that had brought him here. The long nights hunched over his computer, analyzing forex charts, the calculated risks, the sleepless grind to amass the fortune that now sat in his accounts. It was a journey few could understand, and one Lisa Bradshaw had blatantly dismissed with her prejudice. Moments later, Mrs. Reynolds returned, her expression grim. Lisa has been placed on immediate suspension pending a formal review. Eric nodded. That's a start. Before the conversation could go further, Mrs. Reynolds' phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, her face paling slightly. It seems Lisa's actions have already sparked a reaction. Social media. Someone filmed the incident. It's spreading. Eric raised an eyebrow. Good. Maybe this will push for broader change. The manager sighed. I hope so. And I hope we can earn back your trust. Eric stood, offering a firm handshake. That'll depend on what you do next. As he exited the office, the atmosphere in the bank lobby was noticeably tense. The whispers had grown louder, and Lisa was nowhere to be seen. Eric's gaze swept over the room before he headed for the doors, his posture unwavering despite the curious stares. Eric walked out of the bank, his steps measured but his mind racing. The city's cool afternoon breeze brushed against his face, a stark contrast to the heat of humiliation and anger simmering inside. He reached his sleek black car parked just outside, a testament to the success he'd earned despite the obstacles he faced daily. His phone buzzed as he settled into the driver's seat. A notification popped up. Viral video. Racist bank teller embarrasses client over $1 million deposit. Eric's stomach churned. The video, recorded by a bystander, had already garnered thousands of views in mere hours. Comments flooded the post, ranging from outrage at Lisa's behavior to admiration for Eric's calm handling of the situation. Eric's best friend, Marcus, called moments later. Man, you're trending on social media. Saw the video. Are you okay? Eric sighed. I'm fine, Marcus. Just frustrated. This shouldn't have happened. It shouldn't, but people need to see this, Marcus said firmly. It's bigger than you now. Folks are using this as a rallying point against systemic bias. Eric hesitated. He'd always preferred to keep a low profile, letting his results speak for themselves. But now, the world was watching, and his voice might carry more weight than ever. You think I should speak out? He asked. Absolutely, Marcus said. Tell your story, Eric. Show them who you are and what you've accomplished. Eric thought for a moment, then nodded. All right. I'll write something tonight. Later that evening, Eric sat at his desk, staring at his laptop. His fingers hovered over the keyboard as he struggled to find the right words. Finally, he began typing. Today, I experienced something no one should have to face, being judged by my appearance rather than my character. Despite being a successful trader and investor, I was dismissed and humiliated because of someone's prejudice. This isn't just about me. It's about the countless people who face similar treatment every day. It's time for change. Satisfied, he posted it across his social media accounts. Within minutes, the responses poured in, some offering support, others sharing similar stories. It was a wave of solidarity that both humbled and emboldened him. The next morning, Eric woke up to a flood of notifications. His post had gone viral, attracting the attention of major news outlets. Reporters were already reaching out, asking for interviews. But it wasn't just the media taking notice. Eric's phone rang. It was Mrs. Reynolds. Mr. Walker, she began, her voice cautious, I wanted to inform you that the bank's executive team has seen the video. They're calling for a meeting, and they'd like you to attend. Eric raised an eyebrow. A meeting? For what? To discuss the incident and broader changes within the bank, she said. They want your perspective. Eric agreed, sensing an opportunity to turn this ordeal into something meaningful. As he hung up, he couldn't help but wonder, was the bank truly ready to confront its biases, or was this just damage control? Do you think Eric's decision to speak out was the right move? What would you do in his position? Share your thoughts below and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. The next morning, Eric stood outside the gleaming skyscraper that housed the bank's corporate offices. The tall glass building reflected the city's bustling streets, a stark reminder of the power structures he was about to challenge. Dressed impeccably in a navy suit, Eric adjusted his tie and took a deep breath before stepping inside. The receptionist greeted him with a polite smile, far removed from the hostility he'd faced days ago. "Mr. Walker, they're expecting you in the executive conference room. 11th floor." The elevator ride was quiet, but Eric's mind wasn't. He knew this meeting could be a turning point, not just for him, but for countless others who'd experienced discrimination in similar settings. The conference room was large and imposing, with a long mahogany table at its center. The bank's top executives, a mix of men and women in sharp suits, were already seated. Mrs. Reynolds gave Eric a welcoming nod as he entered, and the CEO, an older man with silver hair and a no-nonsense demeanor, gestured for him to sit. "Mr. Walker," the CEO began, his voice calm but authoritative, "let me start by apologizing for the unacceptable treatment you received. It goes against everything we stand for as an institution." Eric met his gaze evenly. "I appreciate the apology, but this isn't just about me. This is about how systemic bias impacts people every day." The video made that clear. The room fell silent, the weight of Eric's words sinking in. One executive, a woman with glasses perched on her nose, leaned forward. "You're absolutely right, Mr. Walker. The incident has sparked a much-needed conversation about how we operate. We'd like to hear your perspective on how we can do better." Eric took a moment to collect his thoughts. "You need more than apologies. You need actionable change. That means comprehensive training for your staff, not just on racial bias, but on how to treat every client with dignity and respect. It means creating clear policies that hold employees accountable when they fall short." The CEO nodded slowly. "Those are excellent points. We're prepared to implement mandatory bias training and review our hiring practices to ensure more diversity within our ranks. But we also want to collaborate with you on this." Eric raised an eyebrow. "Collaborate how?" "We'd like you to consult with us," the CEO explained. "Help us shape the programs we need to implement. You're not only a valued client, but someone who clearly understands the broader implications of these issues." Eric considered the offer. On one hand, it felt like a step in the right direction. On the other, he couldn't ignore the possibility that the bank was simply trying to save face. "I'm open to the idea," he said cautiously. "But only if this isn't just for show. I need to see a real commitment to change." The CEO nodded again, his expression serious. "You have my word." Before the meeting concluded, Mrs. Reynolds addressed the room. "I also want to take this moment to update everyone. Lisa Bradshaw is no longer employed with the bank. Her actions were inexcusable, and we've made it clear that this behavior won't be tolerated." Eric allowed himself a small nod of approval. It was a start, but there was still much to be done. As he left the building, Eric felt a mix of emotions: satisfaction at being heard, skepticism about the bank's sincerity, and a renewed sense of purpose. He had turned a moment of humiliation into a platform for change, but the fight was far from over. Eric stepped into his apartment, his mind still racing from the meeting. The bank's offer to collaborate seemed genuine, but he couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that their intentions might be more about protecting their reputation than enacting real change. His phone buzzed on the counter. It was Marcus again, his voice lively as soon as Eric picked up. "How'd the meeting go, man?" "They apologized and offered me a consulting role," Eric said, dropping onto his couch. "A consulting role?" Marcus's tone was skeptical. "You think they're serious, or just trying to make it all blow over?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out," Eric admitted. "They promised to implement bias training and improve their policies. But promises don't always translate to action." "You're right about that," Marcus agreed. "So, what's your move?" Eric sighed, staring at the city skyline through his window. "I'll give them a chance. But I'm keeping the pressure on. If they think I'll let them off easy, they've got another thing coming." Later that evening, Eric sat at his laptop, drafting a follow-up post for social media. He wanted to keep the momentum going, to ensure the public remained engaged and the bank stayed accountable. Today, I sat down with the executives of the bank where I was humiliated just days ago. They acknowledged their failure and promised change, including training, policy reviews, and a commitment to diversity. They've asked me to help guide these efforts. I've agreed, but only on the condition that their actions match their words. This isn't just about one incident. It's about creating a culture where everyone is treated with dignity and respect. I'll keep you updated. He hit post, and within minutes, the responses started flooding in. Most were supportive, praising his determination to push for change. Others were more cynical, questioning whether the bank's efforts would be genuine. Eric couldn't blame them. He had the same doubts. The next day, Eric received an email from the bank's executive team outlining their proposed plans. Mandatory bias training for all employees, an anonymous reporting system for discrimination, and a diversity council to oversee hiring practices. They also invited him to attend their first training session as a guest speaker. The training was scheduled for the following week, and Eric spent the days leading up to it preparing. He wanted his words to resonate, not just as a lecture, but as a wake-up call. He thought back to the countless microaggressions and overt prejudices he'd faced throughout his career, channeling those experiences into a message that would challenge the staff to reflect on their own biases. When the day of the training arrived, Eric stood in front of a room filled with bank employees. Some looked curious, others defensive. Lisa Bradshaw's absence was palpable, though no one mentioned her by name. Eric took a deep breath and began. "I'm here today not just as a guest speaker, but as someone who was wronged in this very institution. What happened to me wasn't just a bad moment. It was a symptom of a larger problem that affects millions of people every day." He shared his story with raw honesty, recounting the humiliation he felt and the resilience it took to stand up against it. By the time he finished, the room was silent, the weight of his words hanging heavy in the air. As the session concluded, one of the employees raised a hand. "Mr. Walker, what can we do, individually, to make sure this doesn't happen again?" Eric smiled faintly. "Start by questioning your assumptions. Treat every person who walks through those doors with respect, no matter what they look like. Change begins with how you treat the people right in front of you." The room erupted in applause, and for the first time, Eric felt a glimmer of hope that the bank's culture might truly shift. Eric left the training session feeling cautiously optimistic. The employees' reactions had been encouraging, but he knew one session wouldn't erase deeply ingrained biases. Change would require sustained effort, accountability, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. Back at his apartment, Eric scrolled through his social media feed. The video of his initial encounter with Lisa had now surpassed 2 million views, with countless comments sparking discussions about racial bias in corporate settings. Some users shared their own experiences, while others demanded justice and systemic reform. A direct message caught his attention. It was from a young man named Jason, who claimed to be Lisa Bradshaw's cousin. "Hi, Mr. Walker. I hope this message finds you well. I'm reaching out because Lisa's been going through a tough time since the incident. I don't condone what she did, but I wanted you to know she's facing a lot of backlash, and it's been overwhelming for her. If you're open to it, she'd like to apologize to you personally." Eric stared at the message, his emotions conflicted. Part of him felt Lisa's actions deserved consequences, but another part believed in the power of accountability and growth. Could a conversation with her lead to something meaningful? The next day, Eric responded to Jason, agreeing to meet Lisa in a neutral setting. They arranged to meet at a quiet cafe downtown. When Eric arrived, Lisa was already seated, her posture tense and her eyes darting nervously. Gone was the smug confidence he'd encountered at the bank. She stood as he approached, her voice shaky. "Mr. Walker, thank you for agreeing to meet me." Eric nodded and sat across from her. "Lisa." She took a deep breath, her hands gripping the edge of the table. "I want to start by saying I'm sorry. What I did was wrong, there's no excuse for it. I acted out of ignorance and prejudice, and I'm ashamed." Eric studied her, searching for sincerity in her words. "Why now?" he asked. "Why reach out after all this time?" Lisa hesitated, her voice trembling. "Because I've had time to reflect. The backlash, it's been a wake-up call. But more than that, seeing how you handled the situation made me realize how much damage I caused. I want to learn and do better. Eric leaned back, his gaze steady. Learning is good, but it's only the first step. Words are easy, Lisa. Change is hard. I know, she said, her voice breaking slightly. But I'm committed to doing the work. I've already started therapy, and I've joined a local group that focuses on racial equity. I know it doesn't undo what I did, but I'm trying. Eric nodded slowly. If you're serious, you have my support. But understand this isn't about making me, or anyone else, feel better. It's about genuinely changing how you see and treat people. Lisa's eyes filled with tears, but she held them back. Thank you. I won't let this moment go to waste. As they parted ways, Eric felt a mix of emotions. He couldn't predict whether Lisa's intentions would lead to lasting change, but for now, he chose to hope. Hope that people could learn, grow, and dismantle the biases that held them back. Later that evening, Eric shared a thoughtful post online. Today, I met with a person who humiliated me at the bank. She apologized, not just with words, but with a commitment to do better. Change is possible, but it takes accountability and action. This isn't about forgiveness alone, it's about ensuring moments like this lead to meaningful progress. The post sparked yet another wave of conversation, with many commending Eric for his grace and others questioning whether Lisa deserved a second chance. What do you think? Was Eric right to meet with Lisa? Can people like her truly change? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if this story resonates with you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Eric's meeting with Lisa quickly became the focal point of public discussion. His social media post had gone viral, with countless users debating the possibility of genuine change and redemption. Some applauded his decision to give Lisa a chance to grow, while others expressed skepticism, warning that her actions could be part of a self-serving narrative. The following week, Eric returned to the bank for a follow-up meeting with the executives. This time, the room felt less tense and more collaborative. The CEO greeted him with a firm handshake, while Mrs. Reynolds offered a warm smile. Mr. Walker, thank you for your continued involvement, the CEO began. Your feedback and participation have been invaluable in shaping the direction we're taking. Eric nodded, settling into his seat. I'm here because I want to ensure this isn't just a temporary response to bad press. It's about building a foundation for lasting change. The CEO gestured to a stack of documents in front of him. We've finalized our new initiatives. Here's the breakdown. Mandatory quarterly training sessions, an independent oversight committee to review discrimination complaints, and a partnership with local organizations focused on diversity and inclusion. Eric scanned the documents, impressed by the thoroughness of the proposals. But one section caught his eye. You're including employees in the oversight committee, he asked. Yes, Mrs. Reynolds chimed in. We want the committee to reflect a range of voices, employees at every level, not just executives. That's a good start, Eric said, placing the papers back on the table. But policies are only as good as their enforcement. What's your plan for accountability? The CEO leaned forward. We'll be transparent about the outcomes of complaints and policy reviews. Regular updates will be shared with both employees and the public. And anyone found violating these standards will face strict consequences. Eric nodded, satisfied with the response. Then you've got my continued support. But I'll be watching, and so will the public. The meeting wrapped up on a positive note, with both sides committed to the ongoing efforts. As Eric walked out of the building, he couldn't help but feel a sense of cautious optimism. The bank had made promises, and now it was time to see if they could deliver. Later that evening, Eric received a surprising message from a news producer. The story had attracted national attention, and they wanted to feature him on a major evening news program. After some deliberation, he agreed, recognizing the opportunity to broaden the conversation. The interview aired a few days later. Seated in a polished studio, Eric recounted his experience and the steps the bank was taking to address systemic issues. He spoke candidly about his meeting with Lisa and the importance of accountability, emphasizing that change required both individual and institutional efforts. As the segment aired, social media erupted once again. Viewers praised Eric for his poise and his ability to turn a painful moment into a catalyst for progress. But not everyone was supportive. Some accused him of being too forgiving, questioning whether Lisa and the bank deserved his trust. Eric addressed the backlash with another post. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean excusing harmful behavior. It means holding people accountable while allowing them the space to grow. Change is messy, uncomfortable, and imperfect, but it's necessary. I'll continue to push for progress, because standing still isn't an option. The post resonated with many, sparking a broader discussion about the complexities of reconciliation and reform. Eric's story had become more than a viral moment. It was a movement, inspiring people to challenge their own biases and demand better from the systems around them. A month after the initial incident, Eric stood in front of a packed auditorium at a community event organized by the bank. The event, titled Building Bridges, Addressing Bias and Promoting Equity, was part of the institution's new initiative to engage with the public and foster transparency. Eric had been invited as the keynote speaker, and as he looked out at the diverse audience, he felt a sense of purpose. "Good evening," Eric began, his voice steady. "A few weeks ago, I walked into a bank expecting to make a deposit and left with an experience I'll never forget. It was an experience rooted in prejudice, one that exposed the cracks in the way we see and treat each other. But it also opened the door for dialogue, accountability, and change." He paused, scanning the room. Change isn't easy, and it doesn't happen overnight. It requires courage, not just to confront others, but to confront ourselves. To ask the hard questions. What assumptions am I making about others? How am I contributing to the problem? And most importantly, what can I do to make things better? The crowd erupted in applause as Eric continued, sharing his journey as a trader, his struggles with being underestimated, and his determination to turn this incident into a force for good. He highlighted the bank's new initiatives, emphasizing that while they were a step in the right direction, the work was far from done. As Eric concluded his speech, he looked directly at the audience. "I want to leave you with this. It's not enough to say you support change. You have to live it. Every day, in every interaction, you have the power to create a world where everyone is treated with dignity and respect. Use it." The standing ovation that followed was thunderous. As Eric stepped off the stage, several attendees approached him, sharing their own stories of bias and expressing gratitude for his advocacy. Among them was a young girl who looked up at him with wide eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Walker," she said softly. "I want to grow up to be like you." Eric knelt to her level, smiling. "And I want you to grow up in a world where no one has to go through what I did." In the weeks that followed, the bank rolled out its new initiatives, with Eric playing an active role as a consultant. Lisa Bradshaw, meanwhile, continued her journey of growth, sharing updates with Eric about her progress in therapy and community work. While her redemption wasn't guaranteed, Eric chose to support her efforts, believing that real change required patience and grace. Eric's story remained a beacon of hope, inspiring businesses, communities, and individuals to examine their biases and commit to doing better. Though the road ahead was long, Eric knew that he had taken a step in the right direction, not just for himself, but for everyone striving for a more equitable future. What are your thoughts on Eric's journey? Do you believe the bank's efforts will lead to lasting change? Share your final reflections in the comments below, and if you've been inspired by this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that matter.